university in the global south. The present model of the university that we are working with and that we are working from within is the Euro-American model. If we go into the past, there were other models of universities. But we ended up with this colonial, imperial imposition that came alongside conquest in the global south. It will take us another day to talk about other models. Academies modeled differently from this one, but they were academies. But that's an issue for another day. I want to describe this monstrosity that began in what in the Western world they called the Dark Ages. They call it the Dark Ages because it's as far as memory can go. At the time, that's where this model of the university had its genealogies and provenances. And since then, this university has picked up certain terrific and terrible habits that we still live with today. At that particular era, knowledge making and knowledge production was the property of religious officers. You could not come from a corner and say you are now producing knowledge, you are now articulating certain issues, you are now informing society of this and that. You would be inviting crucifixion. You will be killed if you come up with any theory or any idea and say it is knowledge. It was pastors, priests, prophets, and kings that were allowed to pronounce on knowledge. You know the history, eh? That is why up to today, we still are compelled to put on these gowns and these not so pretty capes that we use at graduation. They come from that era. It was still religious. And that's why this monstrous event called the academic, with that song that we don't understand, but that's a religious ceremony, which follows the proper hierarchy of the high priest, the followers, the disciples. I haven't been to the campus of the University of Limpopo, so I can't speak with some authority on it, but if you go to any other campus that I've been to, including VETS, you will find strange figurines affixed on the walls, and these buildings that look like chapels, and certain statues that signify what we all don't know. All these figurines are from that era. That's why most of the text that you see there is in a language that you do not appreciate, but you just live with it. Just like we've been singing that song during the academic procession and carrying that cross, all that. Anyway, that's just my description, but my interest is epistemic. Knowledge production was isolated to religious officers. All other thinkers, all other knowers were banned from ever articulating. You know, in the long history of the West, that people like Socrates, even Jesus Christ, were killed for saying certain things. And that fellow who said the world was round, and that was a crime punishable by death. So all those things date back to that era where it was a crime to produce knowledge and circulate it, and not a religious official. Right, why am I dwelling on this event as if it's the only event? It's because the genealogies and provenances of this university that we are working with are coming from there. Then a certain rupture down the centuries took place right there in the Western world. A group of philosophers came around and made claims that no, that knowledge be produced by religious officers. human beings can master the universe using science and reason. That's why these philosophers came to pronounce the era as the era of the death of God, which is also called enlightenment, where human beings rebel against the idea of knowledge being theosophical. They said knowledge can be scientific, knowledge can be rational, and knowledge can be not suckered. So the Enlightenment era became a huge event in that it changed the way knowledge was approached. And they called it enlightenment because they thought it was the bringing in of light in dark times. Those dark ages were now lit away using enlightenment thinking and enlightenment performances. But happiness was not very long in the enlightenment itself, because these philosophers were not agreed on everything. You know the history. You know the fights, some of you that have visited the philosophical discipline. A group of other philosophers within claimed that philosophy is superstition. It doesn't respect evidence. It's too metaphysical. It's just like the knowledge production of the theosophical era, the Dark Ages. So these philosophers rebelled and said they are going to be scientists who rely on empirical evidence for their truth, not metaphysics, not interpretivism, and any other qualitative approaches. That is what Emmanuel Wallerstein calls the Great Divorce, that produced the broad disciplines of the sciences and the humanities and tore them apart. I'm narrating this history moving towards what my colleague here was mentioning, how this system, right from the theosophical era, built itself based on destroying other systems. Euro-American knowledges, Euro-American languages have all been built on the graves of indigenous knowledges and indigenous languages. That is why this history is important to me. Right, when that divorce happened within the Enlightenment, another group of wise people came through and said, but we love philosophy. We want to interpret. We want to be qualitative in our analysis. But at the same time, we respect evidence. So what are we going to do? Where are we going to belong? When you guys have divided yourselves into scientists and philosophers, we like the philosophical habit, qualitative, metaphysical, interpretive, but we also like the scientific habit, calculation, statistics, empiricism, and other scientific performances. So another group then was born, which decided to use both philosophy and science. I announced that I'm going to be conversational. Can someone help us? Which group is that one? The group that came in between the humanities and the sciences. I was supposed to bring a prize of my book for someone who's going. It's so obvious. Most of us are in that category. The social sciences. That's why social scientists still go and look for evidence. But when they come back from the field, they sit down and interpret, isn't it? So they mix these two disciplines together and all that. And the first social science was history. Others got to be born. I know time is going to be our problem, so I'm going to jog forward. In the way, the Western, the Euro-American disciplines were generated and how they came to be imposed on us. Because the disciplines are not innocent. They actually go on to discipline us and guide the way we feel, the way we think, and our approach to knowledge. And it's one of my allegations that we are still disciplined the way people were disciplined in the Theosophical era, in a systemic and structural way. The university that we operate within still believes in professors that are prophets and certain followers that are like disciples. How many times have you looked behind your shoulder to see that this professor does not see you talking to another professor? Because they like run congregations, isn't it? If you belong to Professor so-and-so school, Professor so-and-so's discipline, you know there's another competing discipline there. And that's how the university works. The things that you are supervising, without you telling them no, that they should not fraternize with other supervisors who challenge the way you think and all that. It's how this university is. It's very provincial, it's very partisan, and it's very colonial. All right, let's move. So, well after the Enlightenment events, there were other developments like the French Revolution. Was it 1789 there? Which produced different structures of society. Specifically, the French Revolution created three broad structures in society. The first was the state, as it was imposed on us. And the third one was civil society, modern society as it is called. Right? When this revolution had constructed these three broad power structures, three disciplines were born alongside these. Because disciplines, as I said, are not innocent. Whenever there are changes, power creates a discipline to deal with that change, to discipline that change, domesticate and control that change. For the new society, sociology was produced, as founded by characters like Augusto Comte. For the market, economics was generated as a discipline. And just, is it 2 years before the French Revolution, if I'm right, Adam Smith had written a very important book, which is the Manifesto of Capitalism, The Wealth of Nations. The book that describes that the wealth of the Western nations will be based on the cheap and free labor of the people of other territories. You know them. That go and loot resources, go and get free labor, and build your wealth upon that. That book became the Manifesto of Capitalist Economics. So when economics was born as a discipline, it was drunk with Adam Smithian philosophy. At the same year again, another Western thinker wrote another important book, which continues to cause problems for us. And that book is Charles Darwin's Origins of the Species, which book suggested that's the first manifesto of scientific racism. The book that argued that there are inferior species, inferior races, and other people that can be disposed of so that the fittest can survive, which was the political message of Charles Darwin's scientific book. Well, the state produced political science, which is a discipline that is not born to give you freedom or grant you happiness, but it's for how states can use coercion and pretend to consensus in order to control the hearts and the minds of the people. So I'm still insisting on my allegation that behind the disciplines is power. And in our case, behind that power of the disciplines is coloniality, which continues to murder indigenous knowledge systems, to murder indigenous languages. Coming down right up to 1945, where there was another important event. When the Second World War had ended, America, the United States of America came into world prominence, 1945. Coming there, it did not come under very easy circumstances because there was a challenge. Soviet communism and Chinese communism were in rampage in the global south. People of the global south did not only look to the west, they were looking all sorts of directions. But America wanted them to look west. Anthropology had already been there. Sociology was already there. But America specifically came up with a very interesting discipline which we continue to exercise. Some of us come from those departments. They called it development studies. But if you read carefully, African writers like Walter Rodney, right inside development studies as a discipline, there is the science from infiltrating effectively into Africa and the entire global south. I hope I've illustrated the point that the disciplines that we are happy to defend every day in the lecture rooms are not and were not generated for our freedom or our happiness, but are all imbricated in coloniality and in getting us to be disciples of white men with long beard. Because the quintessential image of the knower, of the thinker in the university, is not a black person, it's not a woman, it's not a non-gender conforming person, but it's that of the white man with a long beard, isn't it? Whenever you are given an image of a philosopher, of a thinker, it's always like that. Not what some of us look like today. Right. I want to go back briefly to the Enlightenment. It did bring some light under the sun. It did push back the suckered production and circulation of knowledge. But for us in the global south, it was a darkenment. Because that whole idea of saying we can conquer the universe using science and reason included the physical colonization, enslavement, and conquest of the global south. People like Cecil John Rhodes and other slave owners and conquerors came with the idea of mastering the universe, collecting resources, siphoning them back for the wealth of the nations of the Western world. So for us, the Enlightenment was not all that light. There was some darkness to it, and we are still suffering that darkness today. The refugees, the aftermaths, other implications of conquest are still with us, especially in the university, the way we think, the way we know, and how we are taught in Euro-American languages. Right. I want to shift my conversation now to what will a decolonized university look like? Because when we move around and claim that one day we should decolonize these institutions, one day we should decolonize curricula and syllabi, the question that always comes is, how feasible is this? When you decolonize, are you not going to kill standards? When you decolonize, are you not going to kill quality? When you decolonize and start bringing your vendor here and start bringing your Tsonga here and start bringing your Xhosa here, what do you think the university will look like? Because we were brought up knowing that a proper university uses English, French, Germany, and all that. I was witness to an event where a certain school, Pretoria, started experimenting with teaching in indigenous languages. It's black parents like me that went to say, I don't like my kid talking like this. They should start speaking their English through the like, you know. So that's how this thing has gone into us. Even us linguists here, advocates for indigenous languages, deep down we don't trust our indigenous languages. We do catch ourselves feeling like, hey, can you imagine if I bring my vendor from Malamulele into campus? and write a dissertation and all. So that's how deep it is. Because even us who are aware still carry that disease of failing to trust the sensibility, the historicity, and the power of languages. Right. I want to invite you to look at two papers. I'm trying to save time. Two papers that are important to my conversation today. I'm sure some of you colleagues have read these papers. There's one paper by Ramon Crossfogel titled Structure of Knowledge in the Westernized University. The structure of knowledge in the Westernized University. That paper is longish and painful, but it sheds light on many of the challenges we have with indigenous languages and in indigenous knowledge systems. The other paper that is important, freely available online, was produced by Robert Kricker, a researcher, I think is around Pretoria. They are used to meet him. It's titled Shredding the Veil of Reconciliation. This one is a short paper you can read before falling asleep. In that paper, Professor Robert Kricker recounts how these universities in South Africa were created, when they were created, and why they were created. In their beginning, our UCT, Wits, Stellenbosch, and others were created, and their motto was for the education of the sons of empire. Not daughters of empire, not any other people, but the sons of empire. They were designed to produce white young boys into empire builders. Black people, women, including white women, only came later into the scheme of these institutions. That is not what they were designed for. And at the time, education was for free. You only needed to be admitted. The landlords funded your education. Education became a commodity to be sold when people like you came in now. Because in the original design of the university, you were not supposed to be here, all of you. You are invaders, decolonizers, protesters. By virtue of walking into a campus and saying, I'm going to do scholarship, you are challenging a power system that is older than this world. You were not meant to be around this space. And if you move to campuses like Wits, there's everything around campus that tells you that you are not supposed to be here. Other people's ancestors are there, idols, and other images that we don't understand, which remind you that, ofunanda. Right. Quickly, I know that I'm eating into time and I'm beginning to delay maybe the program, which I'm happy to do in the way I had to come here. I came under tough circumstances, I said so. Right. There are about 7 qualities of a decolonized university that I want to leave with us today, including multilingualism, which I'm going to end with. The decolonized university enjoy epistemic diversity, meaning that different knowledges from different directions should meet here on campus and enjoy productive friction, epistemic diversity. Every time you find yourself telling a student you are supervising that their topic is not researchable and that their idea is not an idea, ask yourself if you are not being disciplinary. Ask yourself if you are not resisting epistemic diversity. What I mean by that as well is most people, when you say, that guy there is advancing decoloniality, they give you the propaganda that these people don't white-skinned people in the university. They don't want Euro-American knowledge is in the university. They want to go back to animal skills. That's propaganda. Epistemic diversity means that we need to read Credo Mutwa alongside Plato. We need to read Slavoj Žižek alongside Makubane and Mafeche. And that we need to respect that the folk tales that are told by our grandmothers by the fireside are philosophy and knowledge, not superstition. So don't lie to us. Our ancestors had wisdom, just like yours. Only that that wisdom was different. And difference is not a crime. So epistemic diversity is one quality of this decolonized university. Further to that, the second quality in my view will be human diversity itself. It shouldn't be a crime to find a female person doing scholarship here and doing it well and not being reduced into a miracle. Do you know she has a PhD and she's a woman and she's married? Can you imagine? She has written a book. What should we imagine? It should be normal that women also think. So you might think you are being complimented or praised, but this person is saying that you shouldn't be here. What's a miracle about a woman writing a book? So some of these disciplinary things come disguised as compliments. Someone says, I have a family, I have kids, and now I've written a book, I have a PhD, I'm now a professor. They appreciate my... No, that person is questioning your legitimacy as a thinker. It shouldn't be a crime. So human diversity, human beings of different genders, nationalities, ethnicities, sexualities, and other identity categories shouldn't be criminal to be found in the university. That's the second quality, I think. The third one, how am I doing on time, by the way? Who's disciplining me in terms of time? 32 left. Oh, okay. Thank you, thank you. Right, the other quality would be, in this decolonized university, we should have knowledge not only as a commodity, but also knowledge as a public good. Mahmoud Mamdan wrote this interesting book in 2012 titled Scholars in the Marketplace, where the university is a factory of knowledge. We are like a supermarket of qualifications, where knowledge is bought by those that can afford to pay the fees. Those that cannot are out. And as such, this place becomes a place of disqualification rather than qualification. Because it's no longer about how engaged you are with ideas, but how much you have and what you can afford. I worked for a private college in Pretoria some years ago, and there was this student from Cameroon who was the son of an important person. I won't name the name because it will then be clear. And this boy was driving bigger cars than lecturers and everything and not studying. But their fees had been paid up to the whole 4 years of their qualification. So, paying in Forex, right? So the general manager of the institution called me and said, how did this person fail? Because they paid their fees. So that was my witness of the systemic way in which qualifications are now systemically and structurally being sold. That the boy was not reading, the boy was not studying was not an issue. The issue was that they had paid their fees. So I was being invited to make a plan. Fortunately, there was no Mkwananzi at the time. All right, that's the third quality. Knowledge as a public good. This place should also be a reparative place. A reparative place in that the university as a structure in the system of knowledge and power should be aware of the wounds that we carry. We want, when we come in here as staff and as students, to be acknowledged as people that this system, this institution has wounded. It is our ancestors that were called barbarians. It is our histories that were called superstitions. It is our languages that were called non-languages. So when we come in, we want recognition. We want legitimation. We want acknowledgement. And we want to be included. Then and only then can we say we have decolonized or we are decolonizing. Let's not be tolerated like to be. There's this scandalous thing of you walking around here in South Africa and be told that that is the Department of African Studies, the Department of African Languages, in a university in Africa. It's a paradox of painful proportions. Because how do you have a Center of African Studies in Africa? Take that to Oxford and Cambridge and elsewhere. Every study in this continent, in this country, should be related to Africa. And Africa is centered there. Or otherwise, these universities remain westernized universities in Africa. They are just campuses of Oxford, Cambridge, and other universities in the West. And indeed, these universities became as college campuses, you know that, isn't it? Right. So, we want a reparative university that will allow us to heal. Speak our Venda, speak our Zulu, speak our Tsonga, speak our Lingala on campus. Then can we know and imagine that we belong. The other quality of this place will be inclusive architecture. Over and above that, the architecture here, the spaces here should permit people that live with disabilities and other impairments to circulate freely and inclusively. We do not want University of Cape Town students showed us in 2015 to be moving around here and passing by statues amadlozi abanye abantu, especially abantu asigqilazayo abasenza izinto esingazithandiyo. So colonial artifacts, slavish artifacts, statues of empire builders, statues of enslavers shouldn't be found in a liberating and liberated university in Africa. Because the liberated university in Africa, I'm not suggesting that it should be a village there or another enclave there. It should be a university that is rooted in Africa, but globally relevant and globally competitive. To ask for decolonization and the bringing in of African languages is not to ask for primitivization of the university. It was to ask for inclusion. So inclusive architecture is another demand. Then my last point, this decolonized university must be multilingual. Every person that traffics into this place must be allowed to study in the language of their choice, especially the language of their mother tongue. I'll say something briefly about language. The paradox being that I'm talking to linguists and language people about language. Most of you are attracted by the Babel theory. That know if you come into the university and introduce many languages, how are we going to converse with each other? The Babel theory has got grip and is convincing, but it's fundamentally false. I want to cite Professor Kwesipra. I hope he's going to come around here. I want to see him and see whose beard is longer than whose. The Babel concept has got grip, but it's got faults. Professor Kwesipra has proven that most African languages, because when you go to these institutions and talk about indigenous languages, they will tell you the DRC has got more than 200 languages, Nigeria has got more than 200 languages, South Africa has more than 13 languages. So whose language are you going to teach at the university? Whose language are you going to use? Let's rather be using English and whatever, because we will have chaos here. But Kwesipra has spoken about something called standardization. and harmonization, which exposes the truth that all these languages are mutually intelligible. These languages talk to each other, and most languages are based on other languages. Tell me that there's a fundamental difference between Swati, Zulu, Xhosa, and this Ndebele. The difference is a construction. Because abantu abasenzela uhlelo, abo CM Doc and others, were these missionaries that were up to no good anyway. Yeah. So these languages are not in conflict. I live in Pretoria. I've listened to someone speaking in Venda and another person speaking in Zulu, arguing about Mamelodi Sundowns and hearing each other. That can happen in class, not just at Eastwoods. So African languages talk to each other and they know each other. It's a colonial myth that because we speak different national and ethnic languages, therefore we need English to help us to have a conversation. It's not. Chinua Achebe did another experiment which worked wonders. Every time you talk about Chinua Achebe, people were like, things fall apart, things fall apart, things fall apart. You ask them, what do you like about that book? No one has an answer. Do you know that? If you just say, what's good about that book? It's because it's an Igbo book written in English, which is domestication. Another strategy of bastardizing, bending the colonial languages and getting them to do what we want them to do. Right, but what I wanted to say about indigenous languages is this. There is no separation between language and humanity. You can never walk around here and meet Xhosa walking on his feet, and meet Venda walking on his feet, and meet Tsonga walking on his feet. These languages are always embodied. And they carry a certain people's history, and a certain people's sensibility and spirituality. So if that language is not integrated in the education system, that person is as good as expelled from the education system. That person is as good as unwanted. That person is as good as excluded. So to include indigenous languages in higher education is not correctness, but is human inclusion and liberation. And it is feasible. Most of you know that a few weeks ago, Ngugi wa Thiong'o passed on. Besides Kwesi Pra, Ngugi is one of the African thinkers that advanced the idea of mother tongues, indigenous languages, and indigenous knowledges. Ngugi is the one who gave us the term linguicide in reference to the murder of other people's language by colonial languages. The last book that Ngugi wrote is titled The Language of Languages, in reference to translation. And that is interesting because Ngugi began by advocating for the mother tongue in totality. But with time, he revised his standpoint. So at the time of his passing, Ngugi already began that there is no languages besides translation. Meaning that there's no crime speaking in your here, right in your tongue here. Every self-respecting institution should have translation services so that we can then share ideas. If a student writes their dissertation in Tsonga, to the translation office is translated, other students can their own languages and in the other languages. That's not asking for too much. It's only asking for of indigenous as the being, the power, and the liberty of indigenous people. Because these languages are embodied, these languages are enwelded. They come with universes, they come with worlds. Those words that you have in your indigenous language are also incantations that invoke certain things that we don't want to know about in your background. So we can't tell you, when you are coming to the university, leave your background. You should put it in your laptop and work with it. I hope I've done my bit to illuminate the topic that I chose. Thank you for your attention. And especially the colleagues that brought me here. I came here very dramatically and I remain grateful. Thank you so much.
You, surely all of you, um, I'm not a prophetess, but I know what is in your hearts now. They are saying, yo, poor girl, you do not know what she is going to say. Speaking after the professor, Professor Mpofu. Really, I do not have ways to thank him, because what he said goes beyond what the torture of this monstrosity has done unto our languages. Prof. Mpofu, when you started talking, I thought it's going to be a very troublesome knowledge to us. Troublesome knowledge is the knowledge that is brought to us without having that schemata, the preconceived knowledge in our minds. So because it is new to us, it becomes troublesome. But as you went further, you marinated us. And then I tend to understand deeply that actually we are just committing our own suicide by not acknowledging our own languages. And when you speak about totality, that did not come with the words alone. We come with the mind, we come with the religion, we come with the spirit, with our ancestors. I figuratively compare that to an onion. You see, when we peel an onion, the outer layer is what you see outside. And if you go further inside, you find the core. And that is where our spirit, our spirituality, our knowledge, that is where it lies. But we cover it with what he mentioned, westernized, built to commit or to murder or to assassinate our knowledge. But the problem again he mentioned is our own attitudes. Although there's still a language question in South Africa in particular, and Africa as large, we have attitudes because we are still treating the university, like he said, as a capital, as a business, which must bring in money. So esteemed researchers, if there's any person who has not acknowledged, you are acknowledged, you are recognized. I see the banner for Limpopo provincial government, you are recognized, and surely you have heard what Dr. Mpofu has said. I'm not going to add more, subtract, divide, multiply, because I'll be an outlier. In mathematics, there's what we call an outlier. The number that is very high or very low is not average with us. So thank you, Dr. Mpofu, but there'll be a particular person who's going to thank you after having the questions and comments from the audience. And that is what I'm going to invite now. Anything you'd like to share? Shall we have much? There's a first hands. I will take a set of 5. You're recognized, you'll be number 1. Hello? Or the mic, yes, you can keep it moving for us. We have 1 hand here. We have Prof. Ntombele. We have another prof at the back, 3. Is this yours? 3 hands. Oh, so these people are still going for interviews. They are not yet in universities. Colleagues, we have only 3 hands. May you come up with the first question?
Good morning, colleagues. My name is Lusana Mangani. I am from the University of the Free State. First, I'd like to have a comment on what Prof has shared with us. And my comment is that I think we still depend on the same system that destroyed our languages to develop our languages. And my question is, Prof, do you think we solely depend on government to develop our languages? And if so, or maybe if we don't depend on government, maybe what other alternatives that we can explore to develop our own African languages? Thank you.
Set of three, or let one.
Thank you very much. I agree with quite almost all the points that were shared, but maybe I would want to hear the response to our esteemed presenter. I think he spoke at length about shifting the Eurocentric center so that the center resonates with our notion of Africanness and identity. He also spoke about being globally relevant. Now, if you would interrogate that notion of global relevance, especially in the fact that the global as a phenomenon in itself is located in the West. In pursuit of global relevance, and we retrogressing the decolonial project, because the global is recentering what we are trying to correct back to the West. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Chair. Thank you, our presenter. My question is short. Prof, I am thinking of decolonization, a decolonization project, decolonization of education in particular, and I'm looking at us academics. Most of us, if not all of us, are the product of the very same Eurocentric system. And the accolades that we have, the life we live, is very much supported, I would say, dare say, by the very same system. And some of us have even invested in the very same system by sending their children to the schools of the same system. And we are looked at as people who should advance decolonization, the people who have to ponder on collapsing the very same system. I then see a conflict of interest. My question to you, dear Prof, is, don't you think that the conflict I see, if you also do see it, stands as a challenge, as an obstacle towards this project of decolonization? Thank you.
Thank you for moving the background. May Prof, before Prof can respond, may the following people please take off their vehicles outside. MD01CRGP BJ26RR2N. May you please move your vehicles and you'll be guided where to move them outside. MD0RCRGP BJ26RR2N. Thank you. Prof, the time is yours.
Thank you so much. I want to thank the colleagues for the questions that are helping us to expand our thinking on this subject area. There is dependency, as you are saying, my colleague, that how far should we depend on government to do anything, on policymakers to do anything, and on institutions to do anything. Mexico, they did it. In many other Asian countries, in Latin American countries, they did it. In China, everything is started in Chinese, then it ends with other languages, in exchange with other parts of the world. But it's really centered in Chinese and their languages. So what we're talking about is feasible, is possible. We only need to master the political will. Thank you for that question, my colleague. Yes, shifting the Eurocentric center or provincializing Europe and then looking at ourselves as also the center. Because the crime against humanity that happened was when one day Europe thought that as a province of the world is going to be the world and the center of the world. That's the first crime. We are coming from different provinces of the world. That's fine. There's no crime about it. But the day someone thought it a good idea to conquer another person, to steal their resources, take away their imagination, murder their knowledges, their histories and languages, that is the day conquest happened. That's the day coloniality began. But let me give you another idea besides that one. I was moving around. I move around a lot doing what I'm doing right now in these universities. I have colleagues all over the place that now and again say, can we have a conversation? And I run. One student, I think it was Unizulu, if I'm not mistaken, said, all right, I hear you. But deep down, I suspect that you wish you would go to Oxford one day. Please admit it. I won't laugh. You know how I answered? I said, Oxford owes me. Because the power, the opulence, the prosperity of Europe, first, their economies and polities, and then the universities, is based on our resources. So if it means that I have to that diamond from Kimberley to Oxford and get free education there, let it be. Oxford owes me. So the prosperity of the West is stolen prosperity. Yeah. So all those shining lights and everything, they are coming from Marikana. So what's wrong with me trying to identify with those resources there? Because originally they come here. What I'm trying to say is it can be decolonial reparative to claim a share of the prosperity and the power of Europe. So the globe came to us. Now we can no longer get out of the world. Because of that debt, the historical debt that the globe has created. Frantz Fanon wrote about it. Eric Williams wrote about it. Europe owes the global south materially. So when these people bring what is called aid, donations and all that, it's just things by another name. These people should be bringing reparations for the wounds and the damage, the mega theft that happened. Theft, including that of knowledge. These people did not only loot artifacts and other objects. There are so many ideas that are now called Western knowledge when they are not Western but African and otherwise. There's a lot of knowledge in Western knowledge that is not Western. Because as they went, they were looting any resources, including epistemic resources, including artistic and spiritual resources. So right there in the globe, we must have vested interests. Nobody should tell you that that temple-like structure of the buildings at Oxford is civilization of Europe and you are a stranger. Where did the labor come from? Where did the material resources come from and all that? How many of our ancestors fell down and died when they were building those towers and doing all that? Slave labor. So don't be told that what is in Europe is not yours. Why did Europe get itself entitled in the resources that are here, including epistemic resources? I'm not even going to talk about mineral resources and other resources. So you get my conversation with you. There's another way of looking at it. Don't feel ashamed when you are called to Oxford for a fellowship. Go and fellowship and come back. Just don't forget you come from Malamulele and all that, and start speaking to us in another tone. But thank you for that. It helps to expand our conversation. Yes, there is no more colonized person than an educated person. We suffer the factory faults of this space. And as I said, we are the first people to be uncomfortable when students want to decolonize. We can write about it in our journal papers and book chapters and say indigenous languages. But when push comes to shove, we're the first ones to say, let's wait a bit. Let's be gradual about this. Let's rethink this and all that. So, indeed, we suffer the factory faults of this system, and we are the first suspects of coloniality because we defend it, we're employed by it, our promotion is based on it, and all that. If you start getting your students to write in Venda here, and all that, that will not invite a promotion to your direction. It will invite a lot of suspicion, and you will be lucky if you get away without being disciplined somehow. So I agree with you, my colleague. We really have to look inside. A lot of homework of decolonizing is inside ourselves. You'll be busy chasing Cecil John Rhodes up there, but there's a big one inside yourself that needs to be demolished and all that. Thank you so much again for the questions, colleagues. They help us to see clearly what we're trying to look at.
Yeah, thank you, colleagues, for your contribution and engagement. When Pro speak about Frantz Fanon, it came to my mind that he only began to think that being in Martinique did not help him. By joining the French military is when he came to realize that how Africans were belittled by the French. So in the process of decolonizing, we first have to accept, and then we'll mourn, and then we'll be able to know which direction to take. Like I said, decolonization is like killing an elephant. You take it bit by bit. But the important thing is to acknowledge that we are still in that field which our ancestors were made to plow. And then prophets asked how many of our ancestors died. And that will not stop us, like he said, going to Oxford. But it needs to understand that we are still African. Self-awareness and realization. So thank you, Prof. Colleagues, let me call Dr. Lazani to do her activity. But again, we'll get an email through ALASA 2025. Please just evaluate shortly. It won't take you 10 minutes to complete that survey. Please do that. Dr. Lazani, time is yours. May we have PENSALP chairperson and Prof. Sibola and Dr. Lazani and Prof. to the fore. PENSALP chairperson, Prof. Sibola, or Dr. Choshi, by the way, sorry. Dr. Choshi to the fore, Prof. Sibola, PENSALP chairperson, and Dr. William Jethro Mpofu to the fore, please. Do you have Prof. Sibola in our midst? No? If Prof. Sibola is not there, we'll have Prof. Ntombela again to help. At the representation of the University of Limpopo, if you do not have Professor Moroboya, then Prof. Ntombela, please help us. Megolokwane basadi. Megolokwane, a rena bapedi ka mo le Basotho. Matsonga. Awa re lebogile kudu kudu. We are so grateful for having people of that caliber in our midst to guide, provide that information. Thank you so much, colleagues. Thank you, Dr. Mpofu. We have come to the end of our session. And then we are going for a tea break. And let me indicate that people for Roy Conference 5, I have an important message for you. Royal Conference 5, you'll be moving to a venue allocated for you. Just go downstairs and you find a vehicle waiting for you there. It's a 22-seater, I think. Presenters, delegates for Royal Conference 5, you'll be moved to a venue. There's a vehicle waiting for you downstairs. We may go for tea break. Thank you. Thank you for cooperation. Bye for now.